Hi everyone, and welcome to one of the cooking demonstrations for Love and Spoonfuls, or brought to you by Love and Spoonfuls. I'm Sarah Andrus. I'm a registered dietitian. I spend most days working at Newton Wellesley Hospital in their outpatient clinic, but I also help out with programs like this one. And so this is one of their plenty workshops where we talk about nutrition, cooking, all of that. I wanted to mention that I am not a chef. I don't have any formal culinary training. So any of the recipes that I've chosen, if I can do it, most people can do it, right? So try to keep them easy, minimal equipment, things that you can just whip up at home pretty quickly. So today we'll be talking about stir fries. I love stir fries because they're such an easy way to cook kind of whatever veggies you have left over in the fridge, things that might go bad. You know, you've had a head of broccoli or a red bell pepper in your fridge for, a week or two, and it's starting to look like it might go bad. Whip up, a stir fry. And you can use anything in a stir fry. Today, in addition to the vegetables, we'll be using ground turkey. You can use regular ground turkey or ground turkey breast. Ground turkey breast will have less fat in it, so it's a little bit heart healthier. It's a little bit leaner. It won't have as much of that kind of taste in your mouth in term that fat can lend, but it's definitely kind of a healthier choice. So that's what I would recommend going with. And then in terms of the sauce, we're going to do sesame oil and soy sauce. But if you have kind of a sesame allergy or anything in your house, you don't need the sesame oil. It adds a nice flavor, but it's not necessary. And then in terms of the grain, so usually with any kind of stir fry, you have a grain with it. Most common I see is rice. And it's usually white rice, but white rice kind of gets rid of all those really good nutrients, all the B vitamins, the fiber, all of that. So if you're going to use rice, I suggest brown rice. Today we're going to be using quinoa. I chose this because a lot of people don't know what it is. They've seen it on menus. They wonder, how is it even pronounced? It's pronounced quinoa. And it's a nutritional powerhouse. So brown rice has some protein, has some fiber in it, right? But it doesn't have a complete protein, meaning all those essential little amino acids that you need in your body. And quinoa does have that. So I have kind of a jar of quinoa here. I'm going to use red. I think I have some leftover white. You can use tricolor, you can use just white, you can use red and black, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The color doesn't matter. Sometimes it can affect the cooking time by a minute or two, but that's really it. There's not much of a taste difference either. Sometimes there is a price difference, so that's important to know. All right, so first things first, we're going to go with quinoa. And we're going to start cooking that so that can cook while we're doing the rest of the stir fry. And this is a complete protein. It has all the essential amino acids. So if you have a friend who's vegetarian, or you yourself are vegetarian or something, this can be a great protein source. Since we're also using the ground turkey, it already has a lot of protein in it. So we didn't need to choose the quinoa as well, but it doesn't hurt, right? It has a lot of other benefits. It has a lot of fiber in it and a lot of other vitamins and minerals. So first I'm going to start out by measuring about 1.5 cups of this. Now, the only thing about quinoa is that it has this kind of coating called saponins, and they're a little bit bitter tasting if you don't rinse it off first. So I'm going to rinse these off. So I'm going to measure. So this is 3/4 of a cup, and then about 3/4 of a cup. So I'm just putting it in this kind of mesh sieve. You can use a colander. You can rinse it in a bowl and then drain it with your hand, whatever is easiest, right? So I'm just gonna run this over some cold water for about 30 seconds, just to get rid of that little bitterness. If you don't do it, it's not poisonous or anything. The taste might be a little bit more bitter, and it also might, for some people who have a very sensitive gastrointestinal tract, so if you get kind of gassy or bloated, that might affect it a little bit. So that's why it's just good to rinse it. Okay, so I have this rinsed, and so I have a small pot right here. I don't have equipment to go over my stove, so when I'm by my stove, I'll just kind of explain to you what I'm doing and kind of pass it over so you can kind of see what's happening. But I'm gonna dump this right in. There's nothing else in this pot right now. It's just gonna be the quinoa at first. I'm just gonna take my hand and just kind of scrape the rest of this in. All right. Now, because quinoa doesn't have much of a taste, I like to make it with coconut milk. You can make it with broth, vegetable or chicken or beef broth if you want. You can make it with water, especially if there's a tree nut allergy, you wouldn't want to use coconut milk. But I'm going to use coconut milk because if you're able to, you have it on hand, this is like, 70 cents to $1. It just makes the flavor that much richer. And so if you're making any sort of bowl, whether it be stir fry with quinoa, whether it be kind of a rice bowl, but instead of quinoa, I suggest using coconut milk. So I'm just gonna shake this up a little bit. I got the light coconut milk, and that's because I don't need a lot of that fat in it. I just want a little bit of the flavor of the coconut. And so because there's just a little bit of fat in here, I want to swish it around so that the fat of the coconut doesn't just stick to the lid. So I'll do that. I'm going to take my can opener and I'm just going to dump it right in. And it really shouldn't need anything else. A can of liquid with a cup and a half of quinoa is a pretty good ratio. So I shouldn't need any more water. If you were making a double batch and you didn't have 2 cans of coconut milk, you could just add the other parts with water. It will still give you a little bit of that coconut flavor. So I'm just gonna pour that right in here. And because even despite shaking it, I have a little bit left over on the lid, I'm just gonna come over and grab a spoon and just, because this is the good stuff, right? The stuff that clings to the lid. There we go. All right, so that can be recycled. I'll put that aside for now. So now I'm just going to kind of stir it here. All right. So what else could go in this? You could put some curry powder in it. You could put some cumin. You could put some turmeric. You could put anything in it. But because we have so much of a sauce going in this, I don't need anything else in there. But if you were just going to make the quinoa by itself as a side dish, I would suggest curry powder or cumin. I think those are really nice in there. So I'm going to put this on, let's see, I'm going to do medium high. I want it to start to boil, and then I want to reduce it down to a simmer. So just like with rice. So again, medium high to high, have it come to a boil and then simmer. And you don't need to keep the top on, you can keep it off. It'll absorb enough of the liquid. If you find that it's getting a little bit dry, and because you had it on maybe a little bit too high of a heat, just add a little bit of water to it. It doesn't need to be hot water, just add it right in. I would do, about an 1/8 of a cup at a time, just to recover up the quinoa. The quinoa, as it cooks, it kind of opens, it kind of unravels almost, and so you'll start to see the whiteness on the inside of the quinoa up here. So that's kind of how you can tell when it's done, but I'll definitely show you so you can see. All right, So now this is cooking. It's slightly coming to a boil. So in a couple seconds, I'm going to turn that down. In the meantime, we're going to start with our sauce just to get that all set and ready to go, so that when we have the veggies and the meat in the pan, we can get that rolling and add the flavor right away. So it's always good to kind of get as much prep done first. So we'll do the sauce. So for the sauce, I have soy sauce, sesame oil. Again, you don't necessarily need the sesame oil if you have an allergy. Pepper, and I like a little bit of heat, so I'm using some red pepper, but you definitely don't need to. If someone in your family or you yourself don't like spicy, it's not necessary, but I like a little bit of heat with my stir fry. And that's basically it. Some recipes will call for sugar. I don't think you need it. If you do find that you want a little bit of sweetness, start with just a teaspoon of brown sugar. For this recipe, I'm going to hold off on it because I don't think it really needs it. I think this is enough of flavoring. But again, if you do want a little bit of sweetness, or you find that members of your family eat a little bit more, if there's a little sweetness to it, then that's fine. So I'm going to do about a half cup of this. Normally I would kind of eyeball, but I'll try to measure a little bit here. So this is about a half cup. So far, the tools that we've needed have been the saucepan, a small bowl, and a saute pan for when we'll cook the veggies. And a measuring cup too. All right, and then I'm gonna do about a half a tablespoon. I will eyeball this. I kind of know what that's gonna need. Sesame oil, a little goes a long way. Don't try to put equal parts sesame oil and soy sauce. It'll way overpower the dish. I've learned that from experience and also from some cooking shows too, learning from people who are more experts than I am. So then I'm just gonna add a dash of the red pepper and the black pepper in there just for a little bit of a kick too. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a spoon and I'm gonna stir that around. All right, this is a full boil now, so I'm going to turn that down to a simmer. So a simmer means that a rolling boil means all the bubbles, right, are coming up in great frequency and making a lot of sound. Simmer is when there's just some light, small bubbles coming on. So usually it's low, medium. So there we go. So I have just a couple little bubbles coming up occasionally. That's a nice simmer, and so that'll simmer. What's also really nice about quinoa that I didn't say is it cooks in half the time at least as brown rice, especially, and white rice. Brown rice takes the longest, usually about 40 minutes, unless you are lucky enough to have a rice cooker. And then white rice cooks usually 30 minutes or so. Quinoa takes about 15 minutes. So it's great to do because that's about as long as the rest of this will take. So it'll be timed perfectly. So I'm just going to stir up this a little bit just so that the two oils come together and the peppers are mixed in nicely. Notice that I didn't add any salt to this because the soy sauce has so much salt. You don't need any more salt. All right, I'm going to set that aside. And now I'm going to start. The next thing you'll need is a cutting board and a knife. And so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take garlic, because garlic likes to cook first. It also smells really good in your kitchen. So I'm just gonna have about 1 clove of garlic. You can do up to 2. I'm just gonna do 1 for today. And I'm gonna grab a knife. I decided to go with a big knife just because I'll be cutting the bell pepper rather, and it's nice to have a bigger knife there. So to cut garlic, so I have, the garlic clove with the skin on and everything. So I'm going to cut off. There's a lot of ways to do this. This is how I do it. So I make a claw with my hand, right, so that if I hit the knife with my hand, it'll just hit my knuckles and won't kind of cut into anything. So I do that. in my hand and I cut off each end. This is helpful because it'll then all of a sudden you'll see that the peel just starts to break away, and then you're left with just the clove itself. So again, cut off the ends and then just peel it off. Some people press it on with a knife like that. I never actually gotten that to work. If you can get it to work, great, but this is also just another way to do it. All right, so now I'm gonna take kind of my claw again, right? And I'm using the tip of the knife and I'm moving the food towards the knife. Once my hand gets close enough and I don't feel comfortable anymore, I put the palm of my hand on top and I just pivot. So the point of the knife is staying the same. I'm just kind of pivoting around. And then you're gonna wanna scrape off gently and carefully the knife, go back. Mincing garlic really just means get it as small as you can. And then that's what it is. It's helpful because you want an even distribution of garlic. You don't wanna have you or a guest or another family member all of a sudden get a big chunk of garlic. It's not a great experience. You want a little bit of that aroma and that flavor, but you don't want it to overpower the dish. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put a little bit of oil in the pan. You can use any kind of oil. If you're gonna stir fry and you want high heat, then I would stay away from olive oil because it has a low smoke point. You can't heat up olive oil too high because it'll become volatile. It'll kind of make the oil a little bit unstable, and that can be problematic for health reasons, as well as a little bit taste too. So if you're gonna do really high heat, I would do peanut oil or sunflower or safflower seed oil, or canola. Most canola oils can get up a little higher than olive oil. But for a stir fry, usually olive oil I don't do. I would do some sort of like canola or peanut oil. So I'm just gonna put about a tablespoon in there, which is about the size of a golf ball, just enough to kind of coat the pan, right? We're just trying to make sure that the garlic doesn't stick to it. So I'm gonna put the garlic right on there. And then I'm gonna start cooking that with the turkey. So I'm gonna turn this on to about medium. I'm just gonna kind of move that around. And then I'm gonna take out the ground turkey. So dealing with meat, you have to be careful, right? Because you don't want to get the meat to cross-contaminate with vegetables. So I want to make sure that it's not going to get on where I'm cooking the vegetables. So I got this just in a vacuum sealed container. So I actually don't really need it to get on any surface, right? If you went to the meat counter and got that, so I'm gonna use a different knife to open this. Then you might have to put it on a plate, but make sure that you don't use the same utensil or plate. Woo! All right, that was a loud sound. That's when you know it's been very well vacuum packed. So the garlic has just started heating up. I know the pan is hot. So now I'm just gonna dump it straight in. Word of caution, there's always a paper in these containers. Do not cook the paper. I have done that before. All right, so now it's important to wash your hands after you've touched any meat. So that again, you just don't want to get salmonella or other foodborne illnesses that you can get from uncooked meat. All right, that is sounding good. So again, I have this on medium heat. All right, I'm gonna gotta get your spatula ready. So I'm gonna use kind of a heat resistant spatula. Any spatula is fine though. And I just wanna come in here I just want to break apart the turkey so that I can get it in smaller pieces so that you have more surface area. That'll help it cook more evenly and a little bit quicker. And it's important to have the meat cook first. That way you can tell when it's done cooking. So if I were to add in all the sauce, you know, if you're making something and you add in tomato sauce and stuff first, it's hard to tell, has the turkey browned? And that's really important because I'm not going to be temperature checking this turkey, but I want to make sure it's cooked through. And so making sure that it's mostly brown before I add in the veggies is going to be helpful. So while that is browning on medium heat, I'm going to bring back my knife that I didn't touch the turkey with and my cutting board. We're going to cut up the bell pepper. Bell peppers you can cut in a couple different ways. You can cut the top of it off, the stem or the crown. But because this knife is a little bit big, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to just cut the sides. So I'm going to come around and just kind of cut this around until I get all the way around and it looks kind of like this. Then I'm going to cut off the end and keep that, the yellow part there. I'm using a yellow bell pepper, but you can use any color. They all are the same. Sometimes there's a price difference. Sometimes green peppers are a little bit cheaper, sometimes yellow are. So I want to try to get as much of the yellow off because I paid for it and I want to use as much of it as I can. So now you're left with kind of bigger chunks. So again, get your claw out and I'm going to cut lengthwise. And then once I cut everything lengthwise, then you combine it all together in a row and then you cut the other way. Cut them into more like bite-sized pieces. You're aiming for bite size. Because no one wants to need a knife in their stir fry. All right, so I'm kind of lining these all up in a row. I know the yellow on the orange tray is not the easiest to see, but cut lengthwise. And sometimes I just go around with my palm of my hand on top, just to kind of see. All right, how's that? So yeah, so you want kind of bite-sized pieces there. So just kind of look around, make sure, sometimes I go once over, just to make sure everything looks bite-sized, carefully scrape it off. I have a few seeds still in here, that's totally fine, doesn't matter. They're edible. So I'm going to do two things before I add in the veggies. One, I'm going to stir this around, this meat, to make sure that it's browning on all sides, right? I now have brown on one side, but still pink on another. So, and now it's also a good time to just break it down even more into smaller pieces, so that you don't have to do that later. And it'll still continue to cook a little faster. So I'm going to turn up the heat just a little bit because mine was on a little bit too low. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the quinoa. It's good to just stir it around a little bit. Yeah, it smells nice. So again, it should be, you know, pretty well covered with water. Rather, every kernel, every grain should be covered in water. It doesn't need to have a thick layer of liquid on top. In this case, it's the coconut milk. But I'm stirring around, and I'm not seeing that these have popped open yet. So it's not done yet, which makes sense because it hasn't really been 15 minutes quite yet. Okay. So that's cooking a little bit. It's becoming a lot more brown. So I've done the peppers. For the broccoli, I am using frozen broccoli. So I got it from, I just pulled it out of the bag right before I started this video, and it comes in its little florets. If you want, you can break them apart a little bit, either with your hands, or you can come over here and just kind of cut them into smaller pieces, because sometimes these bags, they have really jumbo size broccoli florets, and you don't need that. All right. So yeah, so this looks good. This is about a cup or so of broccoli. It's good to have a half cup of veggies for each person. So if you have about a cup or so of the, more is always okay, but at least a cup of the pepper and a cup of the broccoli. I think I have a little bit more in each of these, but that means that by serving 4 people, each person gets half a cup of cooked veggies, which is great. Plus, we're gonna put in spinach at the end, so that'll be another kind of quarter to a half a serving. And I'm gonna cut up the green onions too. So, let's see. So while the turkey's still cooking, I'm just gonna make a little room. So these are green onions. I have 4 here. The recipe only really calls for 3. But since I have 4 left, I just wanna use them all up. So I'm gonna cut off these kind of stringy, hairy looking ends and just toss those. And then the leafy green part, you don't really need. You can use these as like a pesto or something. I have a lot of greens in there, and those are already starting to go bad, so sadly I am going to throw them away, but you definitely can keep the leafy part for other dishes. For this one, I'm not going to keep the leafy part though. It doesn't really go that well. So I had rinsed these off a little bit beforehand, but I'm just making sure that there's no other dirt or anything on them. And so now I'm left with a little bit of the white part and some of the green. And so now we're just going to chop them up into small little pieces. Again, using that claw. And putting my hand on top so I don't hurt it at the end. I'm just kind of pivoting around, right? I'm just trying to chop them up. It's all, you know, especially the slightly leafier green part, that's sometimes a little bit harder to chop through, so you might have to go through a couple different times. Great. So now I have all my veggies and I have my sauce. The meat is cooking and it's pretty brown, which is great. If yours isn't completely brown, that's okay. As long as it's mostly brown, because we're going to continue cooking here. And I'm going to take a look at my quinoa once again. Oh, it's definitely getting close. I want you guys to be able to see this. So if you look here, if you can see that it's kind of opened up, so you can kind of see the white, almost like little circles around it. That's what it should look like. I'm going to keep on cooking it for another, probably about 2 minutes, just to get rid of the excess liquid and to keep it cooking. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just put the top, we're going to turn the heat off, put the top on, and let it just kind of sit there. All right. So I'm going to put these veggies in here. So I'm going to put the bell pepper and the broccoli, and then I'm going to put the green peppers because I don't need them both on at the same time. Because the green onion doesn't need as much, not the green pepper. So let's see. First, I'll do the broccoli. And then with the dull side of the knife, right? I don't want to dull the knife. So with the kind of the dull, the part of the knife that you don't cut with, that's what I'm going to use to scrape off the pepper. It just helps the health of your knife, which is really important because the knife is probably the most important tool. All right, so now I have this beautiful color dish. So I have the turkey, right, that's mostly brown here. I have the peppers and I have the broccoli. So, all right, let's see. So, I just want to see. All right, so now I'm going to cook those for about a minute or so, and then just so that they can get a head start, then I'm going to add in these green onions, and then I'm going to add in the leafy greens. So the leafy greens I bought fresh. You can also use frozen. So if the fresh stuff in this container, it's already washed, which makes it really easy. If it's on sale, excellent, pick it up, definitely. If not, frozen kale or spinach or really anything, but it's usually kale or spinach, can be cheaper, and that will work really well in a stir fry because that moisture, that excess moisture that you get from frozen fruits and veggies work really well in a stir fry because you just evaporate out that liquid, right? I have some smoke going up in here, and that's because a lot of this moisture is kind of leaving the food, and so frozen works well. If you were to bake something with frozen fruits or veggies, you would want to take into account that moisture because that's a little bit harder to take out. But in something that you're cooking on the stovetop, that's great. All right, so I'm going to add in these onions too. Perfect. Gotta love the color there. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stir this around, and then I'm going to add the sauce because you'll probably start to notice that it gets a little dry. All right. So now we're going to add in this sauce. You want to be careful not to pour it onto it from too high above because depending on how high the heat is, you could end up kind of splashing it back. So I just want to make people cognizant of that. All right. So now that I have the sauce, it's important to toss this all around to make sure that everything's coated evenly. So again, because this is a stir fry, I chose kind of more of those spices that are popular in Asian cuisine. So the soy sauce, the sesame oil. You could make a stir fry that's a little bit more with the coconut milk and with the curry powders, and make it maybe a little bit more of an Indian style dish. So stir fries are very forgiving that way. I just had a little bit leftover sauce. I didn't want that to go bad, or to be wasted rather. But again, I just chose this to be a little bit more of that more Asian cuisine, since that's typically what people think of when they think of stir fries. All right. So now while that's going, check the quinoa again. This is a great multitasking tool. So here we have the quinoa, right? So really no more liquid. I know you probably can't see this super well, but not really much more liquid. It smells a little bit coconutty. You have the nice grains that have popped open. So I'm going to stir this around, get it off of all the edges. I'm going to turn the temperature off. And then I have my lid in here. I'm going to put the lid on it and just remove that from the heat and just let it sit there. And it'll kind of continue to absorb any remaining liquid, and you can fluff it up at the very end with a fork or a spoon and just kind of get it all fluffed up. So this is cooking along beautifully. So now the only thing we have left to do here is to add in our spinach. keep looking at the recipe to make sure that I'm not doing anything wrong while I'm talking. So in terms of the amount, it is amazing how much, like I could put this whole container in here and it would be fine because so much water is taken out of this that you're really just left with the remaining leaf and all of its nutrients. So I would say go for as much as you can. 2 cups, 3 cups, whatever. I put in probably about 2.5 cups there. So again, I just put the leaves on top, and now I'm going to kind of stir them around because I do want them to wilt, right? I want them to cook a little bit. So while this is cooking, let's talk a little bit about the nutrients in here. So the broccoli and the bell pepper and the spinach all provide fiber. So this is already a pretty high fiber dish. Then we have the quinoa that has a ton of fiber in it as well. So most Americans get far too little fiber, but this dish, which takes about 20 minutes from start to finish, is loaded with fiber, and it keeps in the fridge for about 4 to 5 days, I would say. So it's very good there as well. So you can cook it on a Sunday and have it for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for lunch. Or you can cook it one time for a family of 4, whatever kind of your family structure is. The ground turkey provides a ton of protein, and the quinoa provides protein too. The quinoa also has a little bit of starch in it, so there's definitely still kind of a carbohydrate there, but it's not as starchy as if you were to do just white rice, for example. So let me show you what I'm looking at here. I want the leafy greens to be pretty wilted, right? So they still kind of have their form, but they definitely have lost some water. And look at how much that just shrank right down. I mean, that's pretty incredible. All right. So now this looks pretty cooked. What you're looking for is to make sure that the pepper is a little bit soft, but you don't want it mushy. The same with the broccoli. So that's why we've cooked them probably for about 5 minutes total or so. The heat of everything, the pan, the turkey that was already in there, all that stuff helped cook it up a little bit faster. The oil around there that's coating it helped cook a little bit longer, faster rather, and not have to cook as long. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it off the heat, get it off the heat, and then make a bowl and put the quinoa down first and then top it. You want about a 1/2 cup of quinoa and about a cup of the rest of the stuff. So that'll be about a 1/2 cup of the veggies and a 1/2 cup of the protein. For most people, you want protein that's about the size of your palm, maybe a little bit more. And so that's about a 1/2 cup. A cup is about the size of your fist. You don't need a full cup of meat. You really just need about a 1/2 cup or so. These days with the burgers getting bigger and bigger and everything, we're kind of used to eating bigger portions like that, but you don't necessarily need it. So this looks great to me. So if I do say so myself. So I think we'll consider that done. And then I want you to see, so this has been, right, the quinoa has just been sitting there. And now you can kind of fluff it a little bit with your fork or a spoon. And I will get a bowl. So a 1/2 cup portion of this. I'm not plating it very, very well here. Let's see. All right, so that's about half cup there. I'll use the same spoon over here. You want about a cup of this. Really about half your plate should be vegetables. That's a good rule of thumb. So in a dish like this, right, if I make a good majority of the plate this mixture and make sure that more of it was veggies than it was meat, then that's good. So this is what we're looking at here. We're looking at a little more than half of this as the veggies and protein, and then the quinoa there. And so this is great for lunch, for dinner. There are also ways to make quinoa kind of sweet too, and so we could always talk about that in another lesson, another episode. But I hope you learned a lot here, or at least something new. We're always trying to learn something new. And I hope that you are less intimidated if you have been about cooking quinoa or stir fries or something. And I hope that you realize how versatile this can be. You can use a lot of different vegetables. I just happen to use broccoli, bell peppers, and spinach. But you could use tomatoes in this if you wanted to. You could use corn. You could use kale or collard greens for a leafy vegetable. Sometimes you can use cauliflower. You can use cauliflower rice. That's found frozen in a lot of stores nowadays. So instead of quinoa or brown rice, you could use cauliflower rice. So just using a vegetable as your base. For the protein, I chose to use an animal protein, but I also use tofu a lot, or tempeh. You could also use chicken breast. That would be a good kind of lower fat protein option. So yeah, bon appetit.